or I guess you're in South Carolina, right? So it's good afternoon
Yes,
to
sir.
you. My name is Ben Glickman. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the state of California. Much more importantly, I'm an alumnus of this program and was lucky enough to be on a national championship team way back in 1995. And you can see we're in the House Intelligence Committee room this morning. So just like the real thing.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired as a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I handled federal government contract disputes around the country, and I live in Annapolis, and I've been involved with the program for about 20 years.
And I'm Marcia Holland. I was a career public defender up in Alaska, but when I moved to Montana, I started teaching at the law school here. I too have been involved with this program for about the same amount of time. So happy to see you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should have mentioned it's really great that you guys chose to continue participating, even though I know your schools are probably closed and it made it more challenging, and you could have just started summer early, but it's awesome that you guys are here. So if you want to introduce yourselves, we'll get going.
Well, hi, my name is Nora Gore.
Hi, I'm Kennedy Smith.
And I am Dylan Prince.
Awesome, and you are Unit 3, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. So if you're ready, I'll go ahead and ask the question for the benefit of the video. It should be no surprise to you, but it is number 3. In 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between these two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? Whenever you're ready.
The 19th Amendment declares that the right of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The Equal Rights Amendment similarly bans discrimination and guarantees all Americans equal rights regardless of sex. While the 19th Amendment sought to end voter discrimination against women, the Equal Rights Amendment calls for the guarantees of civil and legal rights among all facets of life and sexual orientation.
The first ERA simply stated that men and women shall have equal rights throughout the United States and every place subject to its jurisdiction. The objective, Alice Paul said, is to take sex out of law, to give women the equality in law that they have won at the polls. Another glaring difference is that the 19th Amendment was passed, yet the ERA has not been enshrined into the Constitution, despite Virginia passing it in January 2020. The state acted 38 years after the 1982 deadline for ratification.
The 19th Amendment not only granted women in America the right of suffrage, but it also rallied the new voting population of women to expand rights on reproductive health care. In Acad v. Children's Hospital, Justice George Sutherland held that the 19th Amendment represented a command of gender equality beyond the vote.
Women could advocate against other inequalities that they faced, such as economic and reproductive injustice. In the past 90 years, women have made rapid progress. They have advanced further, holding various positions of power, as well as attaining the right to privacy. 2018 showed this growth, with having the most women and diverse House of Representatives in our country's history. There are still obstacles to overcome, though, said Mayor Patricia McDonald.
Women began to hold similar jobs to men, yet lacked equal pay. The Bureau of Labor Statistics discovered that in 2018, the median weekly earnings for full-time female workers was only 81% of that of men's earnings. Only 6 countries currently give men and women equal rights across the world, according to World Bank. France saw the biggest improvement over the past decade from implementing a domestic violence law and in introducing paid parental leave. However, countries in the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa give women less than half the legal rights of men measured in the area measured by the group.
Overall, the global average indicates that in the average nation, a woman receives 3/4 of the legal rights that men do. The UK achieved a score of 97.5, Germany measured at 91.88, and Australia scored 96.88. However, the US scored 83.75, placing it outside of the global top 50. If women have equal opportunities to reach their full potential, the world would not only be fairer, it would be more prosperous as well, World Bank Group Interim President Georgia Villa said.
There are advantages to each state passing their own ERA. If law needed change, it would be quicker to change each state law than one federal law. Liberal states like California and New York would be the first to guarantee the protections to their population. However, the process for passing the ERA may become just as slow as the ratification for the 19th Amendment, as Mississippi was the last to ratify it in March 1984. Another disadvantage of states creating their own ERA is that the same level of protections one state gets would not cross state lines.
This is seen today with issues of federalism such as marijuana, family laws, and education. Such actions could undercut any progression the 14th Amendment had on our society through violation of the guarantee of the equal protection to allow states to determine what equal rights are. When 38 states ratify a law, it can be pushed to be federally enforced. An ERA would accomplish the broad structural shift identified by the court in Acad and envisioned by the first women activists at Seneca Falls.
Ah, wow.
Ooh,
Well
that
done.
was close.
Thank you.
It's me. I should be unmuting, not muting. So I'll start with the first question. Do you think, when you talked about Virginia becoming the 38th state to pass the ERA, which it did on January 15th, 2020, do you think actually that the archivist should just register the new amendment and declare it ratified?
I believe the archive should ratify it, although that is currently not able to happen with the deadline that is established. The House did overrule and did try and waive that, but it's now in the Senate. So technically right now it could not be passed. But according to a Pew Research poll, 94% of Americans support the ERA. So I believe it should be passed.
Do you think actually that Article 5 has any impact on the deadline? Has any impact actually? Is it necessary? Do we have to pay attention to it?
The Constitution, Article 5, it doesn't explicitly state that there should be a deadline. And so there's no actual concrete fact that there is a deadline. And while Congress has created that, there's also been amendments such as the 26th Amendment, which was proposed over 200 years ago, but it was still passed recently. And so the argument of the deadline, you also have to consider that.
Thank you.
And so I have a follow-up question that's somewhat related. You mentioned that now there is significant support for the passage of the ERA, but back, especially in the 70s, there was great back and forth between groups of women primarily. And so looking at the issues through the lens of 2020, what were the arguments against passage of the ERA among women's groups back then? And are those concerns present still today?
Many of the arguments were that women already had privileges, and leaders against this, such as Phyllis Schlafly, her campaign was STOP, which is stop taking away our privileges. And the argument was that these women already made it, they were already very successful and they didn't need an amendment. And now leaders such as Victoria Cobb, who are also fighting against the Equal Rights Amendment, they have that same kind of mindset about it. But the problem with this is that while many women have become successful without an Equal Rights Amendment, you also have to take into account many minority women. And there are a majority of white women that have become successful and are in government, despite the lack of representation of women at all. And, the wage gap still exists. Minority women make severely less. And you have to consider the fact that it's not just white women that can become successful. You have to consider the minority woman as well.
Thank you.
And a statistic to kind of back up what Nora was saying with minority women making less, significantly less, was that in South Carolina, our state, we discussed with Justice Kay Hearn yesterday, actually on a Zoom call about this. And she was telling us that the 81 cents on the dollar is just white women. Asian women make 83 cents on the dollar, while minority women, such as other minority women, such as Native Americans and African American women, make less than 50 cents on the dollar compared to that of a white man.
Thank you.
And in agreement with my partners, when we were speaking with our Supreme Court Justice, she was kind of giving us some history about the women's rights and the ERA, and she was talking about how in Seneca Falls, when women were advocating for the 19th Amendment, it was predominantly white women, and African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans still had that disconnect with voting, and they much later were able to vote due to things established such as the Jim Crow laws, which severely prohibited minority rights. So she did preface still establishing the ERA today in 2020 is still relevant because it's not only giving rights to women and the sexes, it's also giving rights to minorities.
Thanks.
So I guess my question is, the pay gap you guys talked about is very real. And I guess my question is, will the ERA, if it were ratified, would it fix it? I mean, it doesn't require equal pay. It just requires, rights cannot be denied on account of sex. So would it necessarily fix the problems you've identified?
Not necessarily the pay cut. The ERA, I don't think the ERA would necessarily fix the pay cut, but it would allow for there to be more flexibility with the rights, and so that these rights weren't so easily infringed upon sometimes in cases such as Acad v. Children's Hospital in 1918. One of the main reasons why this was a suggested case was because of, or was this was a suggested amendment, was because of the pay cuts and the injunctions that employers were trying to put on women.
In addition to my partner's statement, when talking with Washington Post writer Elias Salmon, he actually talked about establishing the ERA would help to undercut those wage gaps because it would bring more prevalence to equality within the sexes in the private sector as well, where right to work states, which were predominantly founded on racist views, can help undercut the loopholes that they have with wage gaps and just inequality of sexes.
Thank you.
Wow, excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Am I starting or are you, Marcia? I always forget.
It's Steele who's actually starting.
No, I'm
No.
last.
Oh, I'm starting. Thank you. Oh, we try to get this all organized ahead of time, but you can see every so often there's a glitch. I want to commend you in terms of the research you did, especially in terms of the world impact, whether we're lagging behind, especially in a lot of as compared to a lot of other places. In terms of the answers to the questions you weren't anticipating, you really had thoughtful answers. Article 5, you had a really great answer. I appreciate that you brought in what's currently going on in terms of still inequality. And what I particularly liked is, what's going on in your state. I mean, you've talked to your Supreme Court Justice. You understand that these are really important and real issues right now. And so that level of commitment to understanding what this question means in your lives right now, I just want to commend you to it. So great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. I thought you guys did a very nice job. I thought the prepared remarks, answered all the questions. You did a good job of what I call signposting, letting us know what part of the question you're answering. One advantage is this, makes it easy to understand where you're going. And you had, as was just mentioned, some really good outside research about the global statistics and what have you that I thought was really well done. On the Q&A, same. I thought you guys had good support and some interesting answers. On my last question, number one, I commend you for reaching out to a WAPO reporter. And number two, I think the point that it would apply to private corporations is key, right? A lot of people will say we don't need this because of the 14th Amendment. But the 14th Amendment is limited to state action. And so it's not going to get us all the way there, even if it were broadly interpreted. We would need something else. And so I think that's an important point to make. So nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. I thought that was an excellent job. And in fact, if I have any criticisms, it's only of us judges, because we didn't stop you soon enough to ask more questions. been very rare that I've been in a hearing where only 3 questions have been asked in 6 minutes. So I would have objected that you were just using up the time, but you weren't. You were giving us more information. Each of you had more to say. So that was very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I hope, I mean, this has gotten you involved with interviewing Washington Post reporters and chief justices of your state, and it must have been quite an experience preparing yourselves for this hearing. And just
Yes, ma'am.
think about now what you have taught yourselves, what you've learned about your civic engagement in the world and your responsibilities in the world. So I'm very confident that you're going to be absolutely sterling citizens the rest of your lives, and you'll pay attention to what's going on, and you'll vote in every election, and you'll probably tell everybody in your families and your friends what you think, so they'll go out and do it too. But I think you're better than that. I think you can go be representatives for the rest of us. You could be, maybe one of you will be the Chief Justice of South Carolina. So think about where you can go with this, because we need you, and you've certainly shown, I don't know what Marcia would say about her classes, but you certainly know more than anybody in my constitutional law class knew. So you're a little bit behind that in time. So congratulations, and I hope you have a wonderful time with this experience and treasure it the rest of your lives, because I
Thank
have
you so
treasured every year hearing these cases. It's wonderful. Your arguments are great.
Thank you.
Thank you.